Right now, this hour, we're here to hear from some incredibly talented artists. Anybody see a little movie that came out last year? Star Wars: The Force Awakens? Come on. The visual language of this movie, the whole movie was just such a thrill ride. I just loved it. We have a lot to cover today, and I have a lot of panelists to bring up. No, I'm not taking a selfie. I'm actually just bringing up a list of their names. So please join me in welcoming Phil Szostak, Doug Chiang, Kevin Jenkins, Matt Alsop, Andre Wallen, Rayne Roberts, and Glenn Dillon to the stage. Come on up. I did it. So this is quite a powerhouse of talent that's on this stage. I want to start, in case some of you don't know all of our panelists, I want to give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves to the crowd and what you did on The Force Awakens and maybe a little about yourself. Why don't we start here?
Hey everybody, I'm Phil Szostak. I'm the author of The Art of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I am kind of known as a concept art guru gatherer at Lucasfilm, generally speaking. I worked for Lucasfilm for the last 8 years, and yeah, that's me.
Thanks.
I'm Andre Wallen. I'm a concept artist, and I worked on The Force Awakens and Rogue One, and currently doing some future Star Wars films. And yeah.
Awesome.
Hello, I'm Glenn Dillon. I worked on Force Awakens as a concept designer, and then I got bumped up to costume designer on Rogue One, and we're currently doing some stuff on the Han Solo standalone film.
Hey, I'm Matt Alsop, concept artist. Worked on Force Awakens, after Godzilla, then Rogue One, and then currently on the next spin-off as well. So it's just keep on rolling. So.
Hi, I'm Kev Jenkins, supervising art director at ILM London. I was a art director on Force Awakens, concept artist on Rogue One, and I don't know what my role is on Episode 8, but. Something on Episode 8.
Hi, I'm Rayne Roberts. I'm not a concept artist. I am a member of the Lucasfilm Story Group. I'm a creative executive there, and I helped develop The Force Awakens. I helped develop Rogue One. I helped develop Episode 8 and more to come. But I love working with these guys, and I help Phil with the art of books.
Hi, I'm Doug Chiang. I'm head of design for Lucasfilm, and I've been working on Star Wars for probably over 20 years. So I was concept artist on The Force Awakens and co-production designer on Rogue One.
Awesome. Yeah. Give another round of applause. So can we start at the very beginning? In fact, at Celebration just a few years ago, you and I had a panel where you were working on concept art for all kinds of different things. Couldn't really talk about it at the time, but when did the art effort on The Force Awakens begin? I guess for each of you, or when did it begin in general for you, Doug, starting with you?
No, it actually started for me in January of 19, in, what was it, 2013?
2013?
Yeah, and so this was way before even the announcement for JJ. So Ricardo came on board, and basically it was great to work with Rick, who's here today, who's the production designer on The Force Awakens. All right. And what's fun is that, Rick has been my mentor for my whole career, and I've been wanting to work back with him for like over 10 years. And so this was a real great opportunity for me to work back with Rick. And so the first, when we spoke, we were just starting to get into it. And we had basically about 3 months worth of blue sky concept work, working with the story team.
And we are going to see what are we going to see today? Are we going to see concepts that are in the final film, concepts and more?
Yeah, a lot of exclusive concepts and stuff that's in the book as well. So yeah, kind of a nice mix of art from everybody.
You guys want to see some cool Force Awakens artwork? Come on, you want to see some? Let's see it. We're staring at this slide down here. There it is. That is just absolutely breathtaking. Can you tell us a little bit about this picture here?
Well, before Doug talks about the art itself, I thought it was important to just talk a little bit about the process we have at Lucasfilm, which is really cool in that we develop story and the art concurrently. So we don't wait for the story to be locked before we get all the artists involved. And as a result, we get this really great cross-pollination between the art and the story departments, where a lot of the ideas the concept artists come up with make their way into the story and vice versa. And so we have this massive kind of ongoing dialogue until the very end, often about what's in the story based on what these guys come up with. So on The Force Awakens, that was definitely part of the process. We had Rick and Doug in our story meetings, and we would come to the art war room and look at all the art, and lots of ideas would spur from there. And for The Force Awakens, one of the first things we did in story development was we had to think about what were the events that happened in the galaxy after Return of the Jedi. Like after the Battle of Endor, what happened? And we talked a lot about the fact that the Empire would not have given up all their power in just one day after a party on Endor, right? So we talked about the fact that there would be little skirmishes between the Empire and the Rebellion, and they might happen all over the galaxy, and that kind of ended up informing what Jakku became, kind of this graveyard for a giant battle. And I'll let Doug kind of talk about the art from there.
Wow. Well, just actually a quick follow-up on that, because I'm curious to know, does that process go all the way through just pre-production, or does it continue through the shoot, or how long does that, or is it still going now with more movies in development?
We do art until the very, very end. I mean, these guys are involved all the way through, so they're an essential part of the process. And when you talk about world building, I mean, this is where it happens.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to steal the clicker real quick.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, like what Rayne said, I mean, one of the first things that we do is art and story work hand in hand. And one of the best things about working early on, before we actually even have a script, is we have a sort of a blue sky phase. And this was developed by Rick. And so in the first month or so, we actually did a thing called Rick's Riff. And that's where Rick encouraged us, and we all encouraged each other to just like blue sky stuff. Turn off your left brain and just come up with crazy ideas, and maybe something will stick. So this image here was something that I was playing around with. And I've always loved Tatooine and mixing things up. And so one of the directions that I was going with was, well, whatever happened to the second Death Star? Maybe it fell on this planet. And so it became a really interesting experiment where we were trying to create an iconic planet but add something new to it. And so this, as crazy as this image is, it started to spark certain things, which then evolved into this. We started thinking, well, maybe this planet actually was a graveyard of spaceships. And so one of the early ideas that we were working with Story was, well, maybe we could actually mimic the opening of Star Wars. And so you see the giant Star Destroyer coming overhead, but then you realize, well, the Star Destroyer is broken. There's something wrong with it. And then you realize, oh, it's not chasing a blockade runner. It's actually being towed by a tug. And the idea early on for this image was that the Empire actually dropped their derelict Star Destroyers here to be scavenged by pirates. And that's how we would meet our first heroine. This idea then evolved with the story team, where it became like, okay, the Battle of Jakku. Maybe it was a war. There was a space war, and this is the debris field that was left on the planet. And what was brilliant about that, working with the story team, is then it allowed us to have Republic cruisers here as well as Star Destroyers. And so one of the things that I really love the sequence, because I love this motif, and I kind of ran with it, and I actually spent quite a bit of time designing it. And one of the things that JJ really wanted to do was, as you know, he loves surprises. He loves reveals. And so this was my idea for how we would reveal Rey. And so it kind of came in a couple of different bits, where JJ, as a filmmaker, loves to give you little bits of information, and then you get a little bit more, and you realize something else, and then you get some more, and you realize what you thought was completely different. And so my idea here was that we would see Rey kind of in costume, and you didn't know if this person was an alien or not. She takes off her mask, and you realize, oh, it's a human, it's a female. Camera pulls back, and she's actually inside something. Camera pulls back further, and you realize, oh, she's inside an AT-AT. And the AT-AT is actually hung inside a larger ship. And as you keep going back and pulling further, you realize, oh, she's in some place very familiar, because you start to see iconic shapes, like the windows of the Star Destroyer. And we follow her journey all the way out. And this is a really fun one for me, because we're basically following her as she goes through this wreckage. And I remember JJ had a very sort of descriptive image of this. He said, basically, think of Rey as an ant crawling through an engine block. And by hearing those words, it was really helpful, because it gave me a sort of mental target for the design. And it's really important when a director can be that expressive, because it really helps nail down what that is. So this was my idea of Rey kind of climbing through it. And it's really important, because part of the task as a design team is to help imbue the designs and the visuals that you see with the feeling of what you're doing. And so one of the things that I want to do was, get an engine block, get an engine transmission in there. So as an audience, you realize that it's an engine, because the Star Destroyer engine is made up of giant pipes, and you may not know that you're actually in the giant engine. And following that progression, we actually follow her outside, and we see that, oh, okay, she was crawling through this giant spaceship with a giant engine, and oh, it's a Star Destroyer. And so that was the part of the reveal. And the thing is, that reveal would have been about 5 minutes long, and we can't do that. And so ultimately in the film, it was probably cut down to 4 or 5 shots. One of the fun things about the sequence is that you see Rey here taking off in her speeder bike. And early on, we didn't have any designs for the speeder bikes. We actually used the speeder bikes from Endor. And when you put Rey on a speeder bike from Endor with this in the background, it created a stunning image. And JJ went one step further and said, well, here, we're going to up that. Instead of a speeder bike, let's have a Millennium Falcon chase with TIE fighters. And I absolutely love that idea because it's really kind of doing what George did best, which is taking something that we're familiar with and keep upping it and keeping the surprise element and making it very visceral. And I had to do this image because one of my favorite sequences in Empire Strikes Back was when the Millennium Falcon actually went inside the asteroid, inside the space whale. And I remember it was so cool as a kid. I think I was 17 then. I remember it was like, oh, the Millennium Falcon has headlights. And so I had to do an image like that, and you can see that I did the same palette, and I even have the same sort of rib pattern to imply that this was a creature of some kind. But it's all those real subtle things that you're kind of updating the old into something new. And then here's the final shot of the Falcon taking off.
Wow. Can we just, yeah, please. You just hit us with multiple examples of art driving story, and that's exactly what you were talking about, Rayne. This all was coming from the visuals that you and your team were producing, and that really informed the script. What about the scavenger bit? You mentioned that Rey, as our heroine, she was the scavenger. Is that something that was given to you from the script, or did that kind of come out of this idea of the graveyard planet?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, we kind of knew roughly that there would be the introduction of a new character that's living on this planet. We didn't know the backstory. So in some ways, during those first month, during Rick's Riff, we would actually invent our own story. And then we would have reviews with the story team. And then they would feed back and say, no, well, how about this? Try this idea. And it was very organic. And I mean, that's why I love the early days of pre-production is that there's no risk. I mean, we're playing with imagery. These are all expendable imagery. And it's very quick to throw ideas, test ideas, and see if something sticks.
That's great. That's good. This is great. I mean, there's so much more to see. I'm looking at this, this Resistance cruiser here.
Well, this is the original sketch that I did the day before, or 2 days before we showed it to JJ of the Resistance troop transport. There were hundreds of versions of this thing. I think all of you guys, we all had a crack at this at one stage or another, working on this thing. And what I realized that JJ needed or was looking for at this point was not a ship that took your eye away from the emotion of what was happening. This is a moment when Han is meeting Leia for the first time in many years. And so what he was looking for was just a place to be able to stage that meeting. And so rather than making a flashy Star Wars ship, and I cannot tell you, and I think everyone will agree how bloody hard it is to design Star Wars ships, but rather than making a flashy ship, what he wanted was something very, very functional. And so the way, after doing all these versions of multiple sort of ships to come about the design was to, I just gathered reference. I found a picture of a Chinook, I found a picture of a tank, and I found a picture of a landing craft. And so the actual design is based on a Chinook aircraft, a helicopter that's literally flipped on its side. So if you turned it back up on its side, you see that it has where the 2 rotors would be. The landing platform, that allows a nice clean exit for Leia to come down the set. And so that was the basis of the actual design and how it kind of formed itself originally. So yeah, I mean, here's the top view that you can see actually the sort of the staging we went through. All we had on set was, apart from a door where Anthony was stood with Carrie, we marked out the width on the floor, the stage, and just hoped none of the extras would walk across it at that time. So yeah, that's pretty much the story behind the troop transport.
I had a question for you, Kev, about this. Because when I first saw it, and especially in the previous slide, I saw this evolution of a B-wing almost. There seems to be a little bit of...
A lot of people say that, but yeah. To me, there's no B-wing in it. I actually looked at something a lot older than that. I probably shouldn't say where I was looking, but there's a few things from my childhood that I was very influenced by in their design. And yeah, so yeah, I think people, because it's asymmetrical, think it comes from a B-wing. but not to me.
It was all about functional and story driving that scene and needing to have a functional.
Chinook is a troop transport in the military, and really that's a story-driven thing. Most of the ships in Star Wars, and even all the sets, they have to kind of do what they imply. So the Falcon kind of looks like a freighter, even though it's not. An X-Wing looks like a Saberjet from the 50s, even though it's not. So you have to try and get across that functionality and imply it. That's the most important thing in ship design in Star Wars. You can't just go, that's a cool shape, because they seem to be the least functional and realistic versions of a Star Wars ship. And also with the design as well, you have to imply things like the armor and sort of, it can take ground attack. It needs, it speaks for itself, I think.
And the intention was always that it would fly parallel to the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's a flying box. It's a cargo box. I mean, that literally, the whole purpose of the entire ship was to bring Leia to the surface and other troops, and so that was the full intention of the design. And then moving on to other things, I mean, this was designed as the entrance to Rey entering the oscillator, and actually it's a dual-purpose concept because I actually painted one round from the other side as well. So we made a two-sided set that when you see it in the film, she enters the oscillator from this way, but right round the side is where Han and Chewie having the conversations about how cold they were when they first land on the planet with Finn. So again, it was a way to shoot the set in a kind of design way from looking at one aspect, and then you move around the corner and there's the entrance to the oscillator. Always trying to be as efficient as we can with our thought process as well as the design. This is a whole sequence that I worked on for a very long time. With Rick, there's a lot of implications that many email conversations that Rick and I had, and conversations that JJ were feeding through about this whole sequence of the Han Solo moment. How much can I talk about this? Can I just, are we there? Can we say what we need to say about
Has everyone seen The Force Awakens? Have you guys?
Spoiler alert.
Well, I think
okay?
what I mean is the implications of how we ordered the design. And so when it was set up, and the actual design of all the images that implied the sets and where we placed everybody was purely based upon this moment that happens as Rey sees what's happening down below to Han and Kylo. The sun itself is being crushed, so the Force at that moment is dying. And at that moment, Kylo himself makes a choice, and that choice is to turn to the dark side, and the light disappears from his face as the red lightsaber comes on, as he kills his father. So these are not lightly implied images. All of that was planned out after many discussions that we had, trying to pace it, trying to work out the height. JJ had shots he specifically talked about looking at different levels, seeing Rey's point of view as she sees the moment of the death. The light that you see in the distance as it dies at that moment, it all implies the most important thing that's going on in the Force at this moment, which is one thing is dying and another thing is turning into the dark side. Again, these images, I'm not sure which of these are in the book, but again, we plotted the whole sequence out over many days and weeks to actually imply some of the set design and the lighting.
And originally there was rain or mist in this scene at one point?
There was a discussion about the oscillator at one point that it had some kind of function, and we had atmosphere, which played a large part in the process. And so a lot of the original images had, had rain and atmospherics, as if the plant had some kind of sort of other purpose.
Now, in terms of timing of when this work was done, a lot of these, like that Kylo Ren piece of art that we saw earlier, it looked pretty mature in terms of its final design as how we saw it. How close to the shooting date was this work discussed?
This was probably, some of the images may be only 3 or 4 weeks away from shoot, and other of the images that may have been trailing into that, because that whole sequence was being planned in the sort of 3 or 4 months up to that time. But we could be adjusting them and re-navigating and retiming them up until the night before.
Thank you. Oh, that's incredibly cool.
I love that bounty hunter.
Yeah, I put him in a few pieces trying to get him in the film, but it never happened.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. try and slip them in, see if Glenn will put them in the film, but
Didn't work.
Well, so Matt, can you tell us a little bit about this piece here?
yeah, sure. So this was quite far into production. We knew that there was going to be a castle interior for Mars, and it was basically Rick came in, and it was me and Andre, and they were like, we need some sketches for what it might feel like inside this sort of like bar type castle. I mean, it's Mars's place, but it's sort of a bar where people hang out, and there's lots of seedy people here. And obviously, all good Star Wars films have that kind of scene. So we wanted like this to be the moment where you have some aliens and crazy characters, and but it was like, how do we make it and not be, the cantina? How is it different? And also, if it's a castle, like, how does a castle look in the world of Star Wars? Like, it's not going to be, even though Star Wars is quite medieval in places, it's not going to be exactly just a castle. So that was kind of the challenge. And this was actually the first piece I did. It was, a lot of my stuff's quite sketchy. Like, it's more like, what's the vibe of this place? Like, it was, rather than going straight into like, what is the design? How does it look? It was more like, what's the feel of it? Like, there's characters hanging out, playing whatever game they're playing, and hands coming in with the characters. So that was the kind of what I was going for, and having some natural daylight coming in, so it's not, we can have like dark areas in this place, but we can also have like nice shafts of light coming in. So so that was the first piece.
I noticed that's one of the earlier versions of BB-8 there as well. I think you saw the handle on the back of his head from the earlier designs.
Yeah, that was quite early, that one. I think his proportions are a little bit different as well, but yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like, when we're doing a lot of these concepts, we don't know exactly what all the characters look like. Like, for example, there's like Chewie and there's Finn, but Finn looks like me because it is me. I was on a rush job on that one, so I basically put myself in there. But we don't know what they're going to look like, the people. So I had no idea who was going to play Finn. So that's kind of why he looks like that. But again, like I think one of the things Rick mentioned, like maybe we could have like a sort of central piece in this place, and it was going to be like maybe a fireplace. So that's what that piece was about, is like quickly getting sort of like, and the thing about Star Wars is there's a lot of like big block shapes, and it's very simplistic. So that was sort of the first approach, just get a really simple shape in there. And as well, like Ralph McQuarrie, like we'll obviously just rip Ralph McQuarrie off all day, that's what we do. So first thing you do when you get a new task is get your Ralph McQuarrie artwork out and flick through it and see what he's done. And he did a lot of like castle exterior type stuff. So. But there wasn't a huge amount of interior stuff, but there was enough there to start like playing with and to get you inspired. So
yeah, the Darth Vader castle illustrations from Empire.
Yeah. So
I see this circular staircase here too. Was the location already scouted? That was a real location, that circular staircase, was it not, or was it built after the concept art?
Build, yeah.
Was that a set build? So that came out of art. Got it.
What was interesting when we were developing that part of the story is there was a certain point when we were looking at the story as a whole, and we kind of said, if this was a fairy tale, like what would we say happened? And this is a moment in the story where the characters find the wise kind of woman, or and so it's interesting that we ended up with a castle, because it's kind of archetypal in that way. That's where you're going to find the person that tells you what you need to do next, But it was a build.
Awesome. That's great.
So they wanted a bar. So I was trying to do something that was like, you got the medieval, you got the castle, like brick and the sort of pillars, but then you've got this like, curved, sort of slightly more modern, bar entrance and the sort of like robot guy or whatever he is behind there. So yeah, that was like the sort of what I was going for there. And you got some low lighting in there just to try and put a little bit more sci-fi in there. But I don't actually know if I don't think there is a bar in there. Or there probably is a bar, but it doesn't look like
there's a counter in the back, yeah.
It doesn't look like that.
There's Star Wars booze, I think.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff we do, like, doesn't end up in it, so it's hard to know.
How many concept art pieces do you think you made on just one show? Do you guys keep count, and do you have records, and do you compare them?
I don't know for this. I counted my Rogue the ones I did for Rogue One, in terms of just concept paintings without versions, I've got about 650.
On all these Star Wars films,
That's quite a lot.
we do a lot, and it's just because, in order to make the world feel very authentic and real, we have to do the groundwork. We have to do all the homework to figure it out. And even though maybe like 1 or 2% ends up on the screen, all that foundation work is there so that when you see these environments, vehicles, creatures, they all make sense because there's a logic that has been done. All the homework has been done.
Again, this is just, quick, sketchy stuff. No idea what Maz was going to look like, so I just put some little creature up there on the back. One of the original thoughts was that she might be like on some sort of balcony area, like overseeing the bar area. So when they come in, you might get a shot like this where you see her up there, but that obviously changed. But
Wow.
Yeah, I love this piece.
That's beautiful.
So this was like, we knew they were going to go down into like some basement area and retrieve Luke's lightsaber. And at the time, it was like, we need an illustration where they all go down there. Like, it wasn't just, I think in the film now, it's like just Rey, but at the time, it was a bigger scene with more of them. And this was just an illustration, really, just to sort of try and get the mood again, like, what's this place? And also, like, if the lightsaber's the only light source in the room, so we get that cool kind of like blue light on everyone. So this is moving on to
Resistance base.
Right.
Exteriors. Yeah.
Resistance base, and again, this is like an example of a really loose sketch. Basically, the original thought was like it's gonna be in like a forest. And the rebels will have like landing pads, and their base. They always knew the base was probably going to be underground, but the rebels always like hide out so they're not, visible, very easy, like from an aerial point of view. So it was like maybe they've got these like landing pads and walkways between trees, and obviously they could get a ship out there, but sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think at this point in the story too, the heroes were going to enter the base from above and through the forest at one point, yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of the forest elements are still in the set for the Resistance base, right? So a lot of that concept still survived.
With the roots.
With the
all
roots.
of the walls and everything.
Yeah. So this was a version of it being a forest, and again, it's just a landing pads within the trees. And then this was actually the first piece I did for the Rebel Resistance base, which was going to be more of a jungle, which is where the sort of vines and roots came from, because they'd already done a lot of the interior concepts. Like Andre had done all the stuff inside, so we knew there was going to be roots, and it was going to be. We knew how it was going to look inside. So above it made sense to be like a jungle with like thick trees, and there would be some sort of ancient temple, like on Yavin, like the rebels like temples. Taking over ancient temples, lugging their gear in there.
It's their thing.
Yeah, it's their thing. So, but in this case, like it was more of like an underground base. So rather than a massive temple in a jungle, it was more of like an overgrown entrance, and that would like slope down, and it'd be
This is gorgeous. I mean, we've seen so many gorgeous pieces already. I just wanted to ask just a quick general question to the whole team. How much does concept art affect photography in terms of the creative conversation that happens? From a piece like this, with all of its lighting, to when the sets are actually lit and the DP is shooting, what is that conversation like? What is that back and forth like? Is that something that is a continued influence all the way through the shoot?
Yeah, no, it's very much so. And that's the great thing about actually having the art department work so early in the story process, is that once the director and the DOP are together, they're part of the art reviews. And so when they actually critique the art, or when the director critiques the art, the DOP is able to inform, like, oh, maybe it might look stronger or better with this kind of lighting, or maybe the shot will look better if we kind of hit this here. And it's something that's very dynamic, and that's where there's a lot of back and forth, and it's really about team effort. I mean, it's very collaborative. The art process starts from day one and actually goes all the way to the very end, even in visual effects and post. And that's something that's rarely ever seen, because you normally think that it starts from day one and then at the shoot it stops, but it really doesn't.
Well, I sat with Dan Mindell and we graded a version of the film through the concept art that he took on set and was used in the lighting process.
Wow.
So we would get the key pieces that we felt were working for those key moments, and then we spent some time regrading them, moving them around. And so Dan had a portfolio that that I was updating at some point constantly for a while that he would take on set and use for the key lighting direction.
So an incredibly collaborative, creative conversation happening all the way through principal photography. Great, thank you for that. That's fascinating, yeah. And this is beautiful, and you can feel the Ralph McQuarrie influence on this as well, very much so, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's the man, isn't he? So,
yeah.
Yeah, and another thing just to quickly mention as well would be like, you know, I found through working on all the Star Wars films actually, you know, if you do like a sort of an aerial shot or like this is what it looks like, they usually don't get signed off as quick. But when you get the, you know, when you do a painting that feels like it could be a shot in the film, like it's a bit more cinematic, it's lower down, it's got a bit more going for it. Like usually, you know, gets JJ or whoever a lot more interested. So yeah, it's nice composing a shot a little bit more like this. As opposed to that kind of aerial one that I had earlier. And then this was this is an example of like we knew the location now. Like it changed from a jungle and it became a location in England called Greenham Common. And there's these old bunkers. And again, it was you know, we know we want to use these, but like we've got all these vines inside and roots. So what are we going to do about that? So I think it was JJ that liked these sort of. I can't remember what these are called. They're like dragon trees or something. I forget. You get them in the desert, but what would they look like on a huge scale? So that's what those trees are in the background there, and that was to try and link in the, you know, all those huge roots and things in the interior. So that was an illustration just to show that, and you know, that's when it came to the actual shoot. That's as far as I know. That's as far as it got. It was going to be something like this, but obviously in post-production they decided to get rid of the trees and just keep it simple, which, you know, I think looks better. It looks cooler when you just keep it simple. So, but this is more of just a test to see what that might look like. And here, this is just without the trees. And again, we knew what they were going to look like. It was just like, you know, what can we do to make this place look a little bit more interesting? So like, let's put some camo nets hanging in, some boxes, obviously put an X-Wing in there. It's always going to help. And those little dudes driving those kind of like things around, like lugging cargo around and that kind of stuff that we might get on a Rebel base. So, and a couple of little Star Wars antennas and things. So that's, yeah. But an example like that is the opposite end of like the blue sky that Doug was doing at the start. This is like, we know where we want to shoot. This is the location. Like, what can we do to it to make it look more Star Wars?
Put an X-Wing there.
Put an X-Wing there, and an orange jumpsuit on a little dude.
That's what it will get it
gold.
approved if I put an X-Wing in the shot. That's so funny.
Exactly.
That's great.
I think that's it. This is on to Andre.
Yep.
Yeah, round of applause. Yeah, great job.
Yeah. So this is sort of a continuation of the set that Matt was just talking about, and this was one of the first concepts that I did of the hangar of the Resistance base, and it was supposed to be hidden inside this cave covered in roots and stuff early on. And so this was a really big space that we played around with during the Blue Sky phase. And I'm just going to keep this short and sweet, so I don't have much more to say about that. And this is when we moved on to the sort of more Aztec-y Yavin type of look that the first film had. And it was supposed to be this really big interior. Darren wanted me to explore how big we could go and how, you know, we could integrate the roots and the vines with all the cables. Sort of, yeah. So yeah, you can see all the heroes lined up there in the background. That was the first time I got to paint Chewbacca, and it was quite a fun thing to do. This was done really early in the pre-production phase, and so this set, along with many others, kept shrinking as time went on. So we started out really big, and then all of a sudden we started developing this more claustrophobic, more classic Star Wars look. And so this was a corridor that I started working on, and I think I must have done maybe like 20 or 30 different versions of this and it just kept shrinking and shrinking and getting more, cluttered with stuff and characters and trying to keep a very painterly feel to it, while at the same time working with 3D elements and photos that you mix in. And and this is a really wide one that I did of the sort of heart of the Resistance base, the control room, and this painting was it grew wider as Darren wanted me to put just about everything in it. He wanted to see the hangar on the right side and the corridor on the left side, and this is when we started to move away from the temple ruin look and more into like of a bunker type of feel, when we knew that it was going to be based on Greenham Common. Did I say that right? Greenham Common? Yeah. And so this is when we still had the X-wings on the inside, by the way, and this is shot from outside where the hangar was on the previous one, and this is where it turned into a storage, storage room, and this I think was the final look that sort of got approved by JJ. And so we kept all the roots and the vines, but we stayed with the bunker look, bunker feel. And so this moving on. This is the Ray's home, and I think this was the first concept that I did. I think this was the first concept, actually, that anyone did of Ray's home, if I remember correctly.
Is this a continued creative conversation from your reveal in Blue Sky?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always the talk that there was lots of debris, and there, of course, would be AT-ATs. And early on, there was a conversation. I think it was JJ's idea. We thought, oh, well, maybe we should use an AT-AT as a home for her. That's where she would hide out.
Yeah. And I remember Darren told me to explore that look. And this was the very first painting that I did. And this was based on the Jordan desert, when the plans were to shoot it in Jordan. And then obviously that changed later on in the development. But so yeah, that was the first concept that I did for that. And the quad jump. Yeah, exactly. So that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is one.
Say that again.
So the quad jumper, which you see in the finished film, is tucked underneath the belly of the AT-AT in this piece. I think at one point it was supposed to be Ray's ship. Right?
Yeah, it might have been, or it might have just been me putting it in there. I'm not sure on that, actually. And so, yeah, this is just another version of that. I was handed a 3D model of the fallen AT-AT, and was told to just integrate it into the sand and how that would look, and different angles to explore. And I think they wanted to do it more of. I think originally they wanted to reveal the AT-AT in establishing shots beforehand, and obviously they kind of flipped that and revealed it at the very end of that scene. And so this is just concepts that were later scrapped, or compositions rather, that were later scrapped because they weren't really necessary. But this was supposed to be a look on Ray entering the belly of the AT-AT. And this is one of the few paintings that I did on the Force Awakens that actually got approved straight away, that didn't need that many versions or iterations. So this is the interior of that, the AT-AT belly, and Ray's home, and JJ he was sold on this look straight away, thank God, and kind of made my life easier that day. And he kind of liked the tilted angle as well, and the sand coming in there, and I think this is just another look on that, kind of a flipped look on that interior. And you can see Ray in her little hammock there, having a nap in the corner. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very, very cool.
So I think that, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Hello. I just wanted to explain a little bit how the costume department works, because there's you have the costume designer, and then you have concept artists within that. And on Force Awakens, Michael Kaplan was the costume designer, and there was Dave Crossman, a costume supervisor. And then when I moved on to Rogue One, because I'd only ever done concept design, I teamed up with David Crossman, and so we're co-costume designers on Rogue One. So just wanted to say about that. But this sketch is a sketch by Michael, and he didn't do many sketches. And when we started on it way back in 2013, the first day on the job, he said, "What do you want to do?" And it was like, I don't know, stormtroopers. You know, dream job. So for quite a long time I did...
It's a good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a long time I did sketches and paintings of stormtroopers' helmets and stuff. But it was that, and along with Kylo, it was like, it took a long time, and things weren't really... You were trying to push away from being a classic stormtrooper, but you kind of wanted it to be recognizable as a stormtrooper as well. And in a way, I found it easier to do like the snow trooper and the TIE pilot and the flame trooper. They all got signed off before the stormtrooper. And for a while, you know, JJ was really happy with those kind of designs, and Michael was happy with those. And so I was trying to push that maybe the new stormtrooper would have the same shaped helmet as the flame trooper, and we're trying to do different designs for that face. But it just wasn't really happening. And then Michael, one morning, did this little sketch and said, you know, how about if you basically joined up the eyes and the other designs, and then that nose piece is floating. And he was suggesting that maybe that it would be completely black, and there'd be no detail there, and it'll be really simple. And that's how that kind of started. So then we developed that, and it just kept on going. And then as it went along, you know, the conversation, well, let's add more business to it, you know, or more technical stuff. And so we ended up doing a version. This was before the breathing hole piece. So for a while, it was just going to be very, very clean. Michael really liked the idea of it being super clean lines, very much, you know, like he was saying, like Apple Mac, what Apple Mac would do with a stormtrooper.
Apple brand stormtrooper.
But as it went on, you know, the fact it was, you know, it's always about collaboration and conversation. And JJ was saying he wanted things to feel a bit more utilitarian and you know, adding stuff that made it look more functional and not so clean. So we started to add the little clips, and so then I added the goggles like that, so you could really see the goggles, and the little clip on the side which joins the goggles to the grill, and then adding that little I don't know what you call it, the breathing hole thing. It's probably been given a name now, but at the time,
yeah, where's Pablo? Oh, when we need him.
we just made it up. So. And then that was the one that, you know, got signed off. So we're really chuffed when that happened, because that felt like a big step, you know. So yeah, this was. I think in the book there's a different version of a snow trooper.
Yeah, this is a new piece that's not in the book.
I think the one in the book was kind of liked for a while, and then as we got closer, I think the flame troopers had already been signed off. So we knew it was a kind of thing that, like they did in the original Star Wars, where we maybe had to mix some of the pieces of armor together. So we'd already had a mold made for that chest for the flame trooper. So the idea was, oh, let's do that, but if we add a little piece here in the chest, then, you know, you have to start streamlining things down and what you can do in the workshop.
Right.
So you kind of cross-pollinate the different troopers, which kind of makes sense as well design-wise, because you feel like an army would do that anyway. They'd have all the pieces
like
for
a kit of parts that they would, yeah.
Exactly. So that was the idea also behind those helmets, like the snow trooper helmet, the flame trooper helmet, and the TIE pilot helmet all have the same lower, like the jaw,
right,
and different upper. So yeah, it's the same kind of jaw line, and it's obviously similar to the snow trooper. But like I say, these all got signed off before the actual main trooper.
Yeah, I love these.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorites. I was really pleased with that. So
Yeah,
when
just
because
so cool.
I just want to mention Sam Williams as well, because he's this brilliant ZBrush artist. So once I've done that, and once that kind of got signed off by JJ and Michael and everyone, then we'd go into a ZBrush thing, and he'd sculpt things in ZBrush, and we'd sit and do all that, and then that would be the next stage before it gets 3D printed and then molded.
Right.
Oh, and I love what you said in the book about the TIE pilot, the original one, having such a kind of a giant head. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So in the original Star Wars, which a lot of people, John Knoll didn't know this until I told him, which I felt quite, amazed that he didn't know. But the original TIE pilot is a Rebel helmet mashed together with a Stormtrooper helmet and sprayed black. So obviously they were limited with time and money back in 1976. And, because that it's one helmet mashed onto another, it's actually massive. And when you see them standing there, they kind of look like Vader's like little children when he walks off. But
Right, big heads and slim
big
bodies.
heads and small bodies.
Yeah.
But when they're in the TIE fight, they look fantastic.
Yeah.
So this was part of the very long process of trying to get to who Kylo Ren was. Because at the very beginning, in some of the story stuff, he was going to be injured, and in the same way that Vader was. In some way, we didn't know why at that stage, but he was in some way disfigured or needed some sort of equipment that would help him breathe, or in some way. So a lot of the stuff then was like, maybe the caliper type legs and some sort of breathing apparatus that might help him breathe. But I think as we moved on, and the story developed, we realized that, oh no, that's too much like Vader, so we'll move on from that.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's a great example of repurposing, right? Yeah, please, go ahead, yeah.
Well, it had been months. I think we had 12 folders. We've got 12 folders of artwork in the safe of Kylo Ren. We used to call him Jedi Killer for a long time. We didn't know his name, so I'll say Jedi Killer because that's how I remember it. So we had loads and loads of Jedi Killer stuff, and it wasn't just me. There was Dermot Power was brought in, and he did some amazing stuff as well, and Kim Pope and Magda. And it just felt like it went on and on and on because nothing was really hitting the mark. We had some of the guys from the creature department as well. Everyone was kind of conscripted to this job for a while. It's just trying to work out what it was going to be. And JJ kept on saying that he wanted something, really different, and really he didn't want it to be like Vader. But yet you could tell that part of him really did. It's like wanting to have that, but you couldn't have it. So it was. I was trying to think of something that was so simple and striking that maybe it would push some buttons. But he liked it. He really liked it, but he didn't think it was for Kylo. So we ended up repurposing it for the gang. Oh yeah, so again, then the conversation started to talk about in some of the meetings that they were discovering that, well, he probably hung out with some sort of a gang when he was young, at the time they didn't know it was the Knights of Ren. They didn't have a name, but it was just like he wanted him to be part of like a group. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe, bike gangs and that, he liked the idea of like, leather and just some wayward youths kind of thing. So I came up with this kind of thing, and again, he liked it, but it wasn't quite right. But he liked the helmet, so again, they got repurposed and used as the Imperial crew on the starships. So then, one of the things that JJ kept on saying in meetings was I think he just said it once or twice, but he said, I want a kid to, when he's sitting on the back seat of his mum's car, and he sees the poster for this film, and he sees that character, I want him to jump off of the seat and say, Mum, what is that? I really want to go and see that. So I was trying to put myself back to when I was a kid and what was the kind of things that I saw when I was a kid that blew my mind. And I don't know if anyone knows, but there's this artist, illustrator called Chris Foss, who used to do these amazing illustrations of spaceships and He did some artwork for the Dune film that never got made.
Yeah, Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah. And my brother was a big fan of him. My brother's an artist as well, and he had loads of his books, and that really blew my mind. It was all this airbrushed artwork, and it was just like, whoa, this is amazing. So I kind of looked at that stuff again, and one of the ships he did was this black and yellow kind of strange shapes on one of the ships, and so that was the inspiration for all of the kind of cheek stuff. So I mean, I wasn't even supposed to be on that morning. I was supposed to be on something else, but I knew that JJ was coming in the afternoon, and because I had this idea, I quickly had about 5 or 6 images very much like this, and I stuck the logo on there because he'd said about it, seeing a poster. So you just try and feed that thing as to whether it'll catch his eye or not. And you know, he came in and he saw one like that and was like, yeah, that's it. He was really chuffed.
Wow.
But he wasn't sure about the yellow, so we talked more about that. But he liked the idea, so then that kind of turned into the conversation of, well, he knew that in the first scene there was going to be lots of fires. So we said, let's make it chrome so that it will look yellow in the reflection, look gold and yellow in the reflection.
My eyes saw chrome, and I think my imagination filled in the fire when I first saw this. You know, it's just interesting, you know, after the fact.
Yeah.
And that process Glenn is describing is so interesting because we have an expression a lot of times where we say, the story wants something that we may not want, or we might think, oh, I don't want that, but the story wants it. And, you know, we were thinking, we don't want him to be like Vader, but we kept coming back to that. And there were some familial connections we inherited from some of George's original ideas, and we moved some things around. And then at the end, we kind of arrived at the fact that Kylo was the son of Leia and Han, and that he would have had this immense reverence for his grandfather, even though he didn't really quite understand his whole, you know, story. So I think it ultimately ended up, again, feeding the story because of the design process.
Yeah, so when I did this image, at that point, we didn't know what the back of his helmet would look like. And I remember talking with like Dermot and Michael and people and saying, you know, I think it should look a bit Vader-ish at the back, because by that point, we knew that he was going to have that scene, I think, with the melted Vader mask. And we were like, you know, he really worships Vader. Why wouldn't he put a little bit of that in his costume? So then I did the stuff with the thing at the back. And that kind of, I think there was a conversation with Kathy and JJ and everyone. And then it was like, okay, maybe it should be. But obviously, it's like, I felt that by shortening it like that, it felt like a younger, kind of sportier version of a Vader, you know, cow. So I went home, because sometimes I don't feel like my drawing is good enough to do anything. So I went home and I did a little plasticine maquette so that I could get that feel of what it was like around the back. And then I brought that back in and we scanned it in. Sam Williams scanned it into the computer, and then we worked on the ZBrush from the scan of the plasticine model.
And was the hood still part of the conversation at this point because of that previous drawing?
I think JJ always wanted a hood. He always wanted a hood, and then it was just a case of then when would it be up and when would it be down. But I think he liked that idea of that raggedy.
Sorry, please continue. This is fascinating. Okay.
So this one wasn't in the book, I don't think, but so yeah, this was one of the ones where Michael really liked this idea of this hood, but not like a classic Jedi hood. So it would be something that was kind of, you know, ripped and torn and kind of put over a little bit. It was more of a rough thing. And again, it's like that, going for that medieval kind of smock look. And it was just, I like that image. It was with the flame trooper in the background.
It's beautiful. It's amazing how that process of, again, about the inevitability of story finding its own logic, and art and story were arriving at that at the same time. Is that kind of what you're saying, or they were informing each other?
They inform each other, because we were trying to figure out things. Like we have this villain character, but then the way the design process is going is that there's something Vader-ish about him. And then it's like, what's happened? So then we figure out that whole backstory, and then we're like, oh, well, he was their son, and he worships his grandfather, and so it's all connected. It's like playing ping pong.
Yeah. Kylo Ren wants it to be Vader too. Yeah, that's dangerous in its own right? That's fascinating
Right.
story.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for the slides.
That's fantastic. Please give them a round of applause. That was just an incredible. To learn so much in such a short amount of time about a movie that many of us have seen so many times already is just mind-blowing. That's great. We actually have some time and want to do some question and answer so to give you an opportunity to ask questions of this very talented group. So we're going to set a microphone up over here on the left. Or how are we doing this? You got a handheld right here and a handheld over here. Okay, got it. Well, start over here. Go ahead.
How you doing? My name is Rusty from Star Wars Underworld. Got a
Hey,
question.
Rusty.
Hey, how you doing? The question I have is there was a lot of leaked concept art before the movie came out. I guess one, was that controlled from your office to put a stop to the leaks, or two, did you guys actually leak concept art that wouldn't be used in the movie just to kind of throw fans off?
We don't leak our concept art, and there's a lot of false leaked concept art that gets out there as well. But no, we would never want anything to leak. We want the audience to experience everything when they come to the theater.
To be honest, it's a bit upsetting when you see, because we're so secretive and we've got all these security systems in place, and we do everything we can. There's like, we have passes to go in rooms and stuff, and it's like Fort Knox. So when something gets out, it's just like, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, I bet. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You want to keep that sense of surprise, right? I think we have another question over here. Yes, right here. Sir, I'm sorry, you look familiar. Are you, can we get a closer look, sir? I'm sorry, sir, could you, yes?
Hey there, can you hear me? I'm a big fan of concept art. I'm really excited to be here. I've got a question. As you can see, I'm more a fan of Rogue One than that Force Awakens thing, whatever it's called. It's a question really for the guy in the app and Doug and Glenn and that. I hear that the director used to do visual effects and Photoshop and stuff. And was that a nightmare? It sounds like he did 650 shots, and they might not have even got used. Sounds like a nightmare working with him. Was he like compared to Jay?
So can you take your helmet off so we can understand you a little bit better? Is that all right?
I think we recognize that voice.
Director of Star Wars Rogue One, Gareth Edwards is in the house. Oh, no, you good. I'm sorry, you had a question, though.
I'd like to apologise to all people from Northern England. That was a terrible accent. Yeah, this seemed like a really good idea until I stood there for about an hour with the helmet on. I've got like a newfound respect for all the extras in our film. I don't really want to ask this, but I guess I do, what is it like when, I know it's heartbreaking when stuff doesn't make the film, and you guys are so talented. How do you get past that? How do you keep going when you know that like 90% of your work's not actually going to be seen on screen?
It's a good question. How do you know?
That's mainly to Matt. 90% of his work isn't on screen. The rest, it all gets accepted.
What was the question?
How does it feel when you know that 90% of the work, you do so many hundreds and hundreds of pieces, is not going to end up on screen?
Gareth enjoys putting me through the torture of that.
Oh?
Yeah. He just keeps making me go in, even though he's going to pick someone else's work.
Anyone else?
No, it's good. Part of our job, you expect that 90% of it is going to go absolutely nowhere. Most of the stuff I've got is just going to sit in a folder for the rest of its life, unless you guys ever release it. But yeah, it's you just expect that, and it's nice when something does get approved or goes through, or you've had some sort of influence. You're like, oh wow, there is a point to what I'm doing.
But part of the process is you're looking for an answer, and you yourself don't know quite what that answer is, and so part of it is to generate artwork that inspires an answer, that then inspires a question, that then allows you to move forward. And so you can get quite disposable about it, and you can kind of have paintings that you love and adore and you're very passionate about. But at the end of the day, we are trying to figure out what is the key component that needs to be visualized on screen. And so you sort of work through it that way.
You're problem solving as well as creating, right? You're really pushing towards. That's Gareth Edwards here, ladies and gentlemen. Right here. That's a great question. Come on up. That was quite a cameo.
But it still hurts when he says no.
Yeah. It still hurts when he says no. Is that what you said? That was great. We do have time for just a few more questions. Right over here. Are these set up? No. Are those questions? Right here. Go ahead.
Hello. So my question is, when you're creating a character who's going to have such an iconic weapon like Kylo Ren with his lightsaber or Rey with her staff, is that something where somebody walks in and says, I want Rey to have a staff, or you said, make something iconic?
Well, to be honest, that's not my department. It's the props department. I mean, everybody works in conjunction with each other, obviously, and you all have meetings and stuff. But when we were doing Kylo, we were just doing, because we weren't really thinking about, we were thinking about the costume and the helmet and stuff. Every time I drew him with a lightsaber, I was just drawing him with a red lightsaber. Then we found out at some point, the props have come up with this, controversial lightsaber. So it was, I can't really talk for them, but I think like all of us, the props department are trying to, push the envelope, try and do new things, do interesting things, and
yeah, and one of the things that we always try to do, I remember, the idea of the crossblade lightsaber came from the prop shop, or the costume, not the costume, but the prop department. And it was really interesting because when we were working on the designs early on, we always were referencing Vader as kind of like a knight. And then JJ actually said, well, maybe we can use more of the Crusade motif. And so that's where I remember when I saw that first original sort of concept for that, I thought it was pretty brilliant. I mean, it kind of surprised me at first, and it took me a little bit to absorb it. And then I actually had a chance to work with JJ to fine-tune the look of what that blade is. And it was really interesting to hear his perspective, because I chased that design for like weeks. I must have done over 24 versions of what that sizzling lightsaber should look like. And he actually said at one point, think of it like bacon. When bacon sizzles, there's those little hot sparks that come off. Now amplify that by 100. And that was a perfect description for me, because when a director can be that clear about a mental image, it really gives me a target to go for. And it was shortly after that I finally kind of fine-tuned that sort of wobbly look for it. And then the guys at ILM then fine-tuned the actual look. But it was all, it was kind of a very organic process. But, to answer your question more directly, it starts in the art department, evolves through all the various departments, story comes in, and of course the director, has a big input in that. So it's really kind of a very collaborative process. I mean, all of us are part of a giant team. I mean, there's dozens of us out there doing all of this kind of work. And so filmmaking, it's one of those fun jobs where you start an idea and somebody runs with it and amplifies it, and then that idea comes back to you and then you run with it again. And so at the end, we're trying to produce the best images for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to add for Ray's staff, that was also a story point, because we needed to make sure she could get in a lightsaber duel at the end of the movie, and we had to have said that.
Oh.
Well, I'll just say that we had to understand how she would have been able to have a lightsaber duel, so we needed to give her a weapon in the beginning of the story that would allow the audience to understand that she can deal with a staff, she can hold a lightsaber.
Thank you. Great. Next question here.
Hi there. Just going off from what I've seen of like making of the original films and everything, George had a very specific vision. I just wanted to know, how does that compare with JJ? Does he want you to bring your own personal influences on your artwork into the film, or does he go on a more centralized aesthetic that he wants everything to tie into?
The mindset for the design, I think, for episode 7, and this came all the way through JJ, and I think the rest of us working on it, was he wanted to make a sequel to Return of the Jedi, and so that design look that finished in that 83 film, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I thought I was designing a film about 1986, and that was sort of my thought forward on how that process was. And JJ was the one that fought us all, I think, against all the designs we did to make sure it was the most retro, the most 80s looking, the most a continuation of what Ralph and Joe and Nilo were doing in those films in the 80s. That's where I started.
I mean, it's really interesting because, I mean, for me, the allure of working on The Force Awakens was really to get back to the roots of Ralph and Joe. And, we all grew up with it as, being huge fans of it. And JJ was exactly that. And I remember one of the first early design briefs was, he wanted us to design a film as if it was a parallel universe, that it was sets that were built, that George built, but he was shooting it for his version of the movie. And that became a template for us where it kind of framed the box in terms of the aesthetic and the time frame of what that design is. And so we leveraged a lot off of Episode 4. Because when you think about it, I mean, Episode 4 was really the foundation of it. And this film, The Force Awakens, takes place 30 years after that. And a lot may not have changed. And so the real task for us was to see, well, if we start with Episode 4, how much should it evolve? And JJ was the ultimate art director for that in terms of guiding us in terms of where that is. And we always try to find that perfect note so that it fit within the Star Wars universe, paid homage to the sort of the Star Wars that we remember, and yet kind of made it a little bit fresh as well.
Right. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And a last question here. Or where is the last one? Is it here? Here? I have no. Oh, here. Right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to go back to George Lucas. Before The Force Awakens, he had put through a treatment to Disney. And I just wondered if any conceptual art had been done for that, and if you could anyway talk about what might have been done for it.
There was no concept art done.
Well, that was a great question. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking these talented artists, everyone from Lucasfilm, everyone from ILM, and the artists on Star Wars: The Force Awakens. May the Force be with you. We will see you tomorrow, and have a great night.